He's not the biggest guy on the team, but those guys can't do this.
Caught a diving play by Revere.
Meet Phillies star Ben Revere and hear about his unlikely path to the big leagues.
And my parents like, what's going on? I'm like, I have no idea.
And then, 9 months behind bars, inside Iran's most notorious prison, an American fights for life, while his wife fights for his freedom. We'll sit down with Naghmeh Abedini on today's 700 Club.
Well, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this edition of the 700 Club. The Supreme Court has finally done it. 5-4, 5-4, 5-4. It isn't exactly overwhelming, but 5 justices have decided that the Congress isn't going to be able to define the benefits that come about from homosexual marriage. And the battle over same-sex marriage is far from over, despite the Supreme Court's ruling in 2 cases.
Leaders on both sides say the issue is still up to the states for now. And some Christian leaders say believers could become a target in future lawsuits over marriage. Paul Strand has the story from Washington.
Gay individuals and groups, as well as their lawyers who fought against DOMA and Proposition 8, now say the next step is to battle nationwide for legalized same-sex marriage everywhere.
We cannot forget our LGBT brothers and sisters that are in states that still discriminate against them, and we will not allow it.
Within 5 years, we will bring marriage equality to all 50 states in this vast country.
With marriage equality back in California, 40% of the population of the United States is covered by marriage equality.
The lawyers battling Proposition 8 say it's effectively dead because the justices ruled those defending it had no standing to defend it.
They said the proponents have no concrete injury. They cannot point to anything that harms them because these 2 loving couples and couples like them throughout California are now going to be able to get married.
Those on the other side weren't necessarily admitting defeat on Prop 8. They say at most the High Court has thrown California and gay marriage into somewhat of a legal limbo.
We remain committed to the continued enforcement of Proposition 8 until there is a statewide order saying otherwise.
Even as it wiped DOMA out, the court specifically did not say states have to legalize gay marriage. But its 2 rulings are a big boost to the gay marriage momentum.
Supporters of traditional marriage certainly have a beef with what the Supreme Court has done here. They're saying, how can 5 justices decide these crucial questions about marriage when the voters and the legislators in 38 states have decided differently?
One of the biggest problems with gay marriage is that in most states where it's become legal, Christians who stand up too clearly for traditional marriage end up getting bashed, sometimes sued. Could that now happen nationwide with DOMA's defeat, especially with the way the justices denigrated opponents of gay marriage?
Now that the majority said that laws defining marriage between one man and one woman are not supported by any rational basis, that they are driven by either ignorance or hostility, I fear that we're going to see a flood of lawsuits where that'll be the lead for the plaintiffs right out at the gate.
Reverend Rob Schenck says believers need to get ready.
The script has already been written. Christians are angry, mean, bigoted, narrow-minded, ugly people. That's the stereotype. I think we have to do what we can to defeat that stereotype.
All sides on this issue say what the court has done here is important, but it certainly does not decide the question of gay marriage for all of America. Paul Strand, CBN News, reporting from the Supreme Court.
Well, Jay Sekulow for the American Center for Law and Justice is with us now. Jay, let me ask you about Anthony Kennedy. Does he have some clerks who happen to be gays?
Oh, I have no idea. I think what Justice Kennedy did, if you look at a series of cases that he's been involved in, he has taken the view that sexual orientation is a special class. So this is consistent with his opinions. Of course, Justice Scalia sharply disagreed. And Pat, there's one thing that has to be established here. The court did not strike down DOMA. They struck down one provision of DOMA, which was the only provision challenged, which was the federal benefit provision, which says if there's a same-sex couple that gets married in a state that allows same-sex marriage, that they get federal benefits, not state benefits, nor does another state have to recognize that marriage. So in a sense, it was narrow, but you have 2 different worldviews clashing in that opinion between what Justice Scalia wrote, which was a concern about the separation of power and the role of the courts, and Justice Kennedy, who was more focused on the what he would call the status of the individuals that were involved here. So that was the impact of what's going on with Justice Kennedy's opinion. I don't know about the background of his clerks. I've had a lot of cases in front of Justice Kennedy, and frankly, most of the time he rules in our favor, vast majority of the time. This time, he took the position that this was basically a special status. But what's interesting, Pat, is when you turn it over to Proposition 8, there the court punted and said there was no standing. And some advocates are saying that the court has established a legal standard allowing same-sex marriage across the country. I'm not sure it's allowing same-sex marriage in all of California. It sent it back and said the district court opinion is going to apply. Now, it may well be that the other district courts in California would take the same position, but this is not even a Court of Appeals decision anymore, and the court saved for another day the idea that there be a constitutional right to same-sex marriage.
Jay, going into California, I understand the district court judge there either was a advocate of homosexual activity, was a homosexual, had a wife, so it was some connection. Can you elucidate that, or do you know?
Well, there was a real controversy because the judge's sexual orientation became, unfortunately part of the case. And there were some other rulings that were issued there that became questionable. In fact, Justice Alito, in a footnote 7 in that opinion, talks about how the court, basically the trial court, created a circus environment during the trial here. But a majority of the court in the Proposition 8 case, which included the Chief Justice of the United States, Chief Justice Roberts, and Justice Scalia, as well as liberal members of the court, said there was no standing to bring the challenge. The court is cautious on standing issues, which generally, frankly, is helpful for our side, especially in the Establishment Clause cases. Here they found there was no standing, and 4 justices said, and again, it was conservatives and liberals on that side too, said there should have been a hearing on the merits, but there was no decision on the merits as far as a constitutional right regarding the redefinition of marriage. Could that come at a later date? Sure, and that's going to depend on who's at the Supreme Court at the time, which means elections have consequences.
Well, the standing thing, the state of California, Jerry Barron and his crew did not want to defend Proposition 8, so they punted. So it was a private individual that went in, and the state said he didn't have standing. Is that the idea? Or the court said that?
Yeah, it was an organization of individuals, and they didn't have standing. And under the California law, it was a closed case, whether an individual or an organization can defend a proposition. Interestingly, in the Defense of Marriage Act, there was another legal issue there, which Justice Scalia touched on, and that was, remember, the Justice Department didn't defend it, even though it was an act of Congress. That raised the issue. So both of these cases had these technical issues, and in the big case, which was Proposition 8, the court took the technicality, not because it's insignificant, by the way. Standing is a big issue, and the Chief Justice wrote at least 4 justices concurred with him that there was no standing there to challenge it. Therefore, the Ninth Circuit decision, which was much broader than the district court, was no longer valid, and it goes back to the district court.
Let me ask you about the whole idea of the court. We've got the Congress of the United States overwhelmingly passing the Defense of Marriage Act, signed into law, I might add, by President Clinton. You've got California, Prop 8, which is overwhelmingly passed by the entire population, the citizens of the state. And both of those actions by an overwhelming group of citizens were overturned by, in the case of the Supreme Court, 5-4. In the case of California, 1 sitting district judge. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, and this is part of the dissent from Justice Scalia focused on that. The idea that the court would have this much power and this much sway. The irony of California is they passed Proposition 8, and then they elected Jerry Brown to be the governor, who then instructed the Attorney General not to defend the proposition. So it's a bizarre twist of electoral fate, if you will. But you point out an important point here, Pat, and that is, look, I'm not going to disparage any of the justices or their staffs or their clerks. I think we've got to look at the fundamental issue is that what is the reach of the courts and what's the role of the courts as a co-equal branch of government? And that's what really Justice Scalia was getting to in his dissent in the Prop 8 case. And that's really the question here. What is the role of the court in these major decisions? They didn't do a Roe versus Wade. They didn't constitutionalize a right here. They are letting the states still be the incubators of this, and I think it's 38 states prohibit it.
But if Kennedy says in that case on Doma, he says that it was motivated by animus, some kind of whatever animus, isn't that going to stigmatize? Go ahead.
Well, that's the thing that people are worried about. I mean, we received a lot of calls yesterday from pastors saying, well, do I have to engage in our church in performing same-sex marriages, which you don't? The First Amendment free exercise clause was not touched by this. But there is that concern. But, I think we should not overreact to this decision. I think the reaction needs to be measured, and measured means, look, really, other than the federal benefits going, I'm not saying that's insignificant, it's the status quo as it was before. 38 states, I think, do not allow same-sex marriage, 12 do, and the District of Columbia. And I think you've got some of those states have constitutional amendments that prohibit it. So, again, this was not a constitutionalized right here at the end of the day. So I think we got to realize what we're dealing with, and the fight continues on both sides of this. Neither side's going away, that I can assure you.
One last question. The ACLJ is representing a number of Tea Party and other groups who've been slowed or denied tax-exempt status by the IRS. How's that case going?
Well, Pat, two big developments. One about 15 minutes ago. Number one, we just filed an amended complaint adding, as we discussed when we were with you last, adding 41 plaintiffs, including groups that were not Tea Party groups, just conservative organizations, pro-life organizations, some just educational groups that got caught up in this dragnet with the IRS. The IRS has put forward a plan, what they call a rapid response plan, an expedited review, almost like you go through the 10-item or less line at the checkout counter at the grocery store. You can get through quickly and we'll give you your exemption if you agree to certain things. By the way, what they ask you to agree to is not constitutionally based nor statutorily based, so that's a problem. And this morning, just 10 minutes ago, the taxpayer advocate, which is part of the IRS, is offering $1,000 per person or per organization that was denied or delayed in their status as the opening salvo in trying to settle this. I think you're going to see an aggressive attempt by the government to try to settle it. I don't think it's going to settle right away. And Pat, there's going to be a hearing today with the acting commissioner, and there's a vote tomorrow in Congress to call Lois Lerner, who took the Fifth Amendment, back to the House to testify. So it's going well, and the IRS is trying to spin out of it. They try to put forward that there were some progressive groups that were targeted. Those progressive groups in an AP report yesterday said, well, we weren't asked obtrusive questions. It just took a little longer than we thought. So again, the IRS, the more they say, the worse it seems to get for them. Well, and now they're offering $1,000 per organization to settle the case.
Well, you found some of those organizations.
But that's how they think.
Yeah, they may have spent hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars, lost revenue, et cetera. That doesn't compensate.
Right. Some of these organizations had, franking privileges was for postage that was $22,000 or $30,000 a month. So the $1,000 a month, I could tell them about the $1,000 offer right here on the 700 Club. Not accepted.
All right. You heard it, Jay. Keep it up. God bless you. Thank you.
We'll do it. All righty.
Well, it looks like the Texas legislature will get another chance to pass an important abortion bill. Lee Webb has more on that story from the CBN newsroom. Here's Lee.
That's right, Pat. Texas Governor Rick Perry has called another special legislative session to try and pass abortion restrictions in that state. Democrat Senator Wendy Davis, along with a loud and angry crowd of pro-abortion protesters, blocked Republican efforts to pass a bill Tuesday night. Political observers, though, believe Republicans will be successful when the next special session begins Monday. Their bill would ban abortions after 20 weeks of pregnancy and establish tighter controls on clinics as well as doctors. Opponents say the measures could close nearly all abortion clinics in the Lone Star State. President Obama is in Senegal today. It is the first stop on his week-long tour of Africa. The president is visiting 3 countries there. The trip aimed at overcoming disappointment in Africa that America's first black president did not give more attention to that continent during his first term. The president will also be visiting South Africa and Tanzania, and he's expected to be greeted warmly there. The trip is expected, though, to cost up to $100 million. Some congressional Republicans have questioned that expense at a time when the sequester has led to spending cuts in government agencies. Well, major changes are coming to a school vending machine near you. High-calorie sports drinks and candy bars will be removed from schools across the country as early as next year. The unhealthy snacks will be replaced with diet drinks, granola bars, and other healthier items. The change is part of the child nutrition law passed by Congress in 2010 in an effort to battle childhood obesity. School lunch menus will also change. Greasy foods will be replaced by items like low-fat hamburgers, fruit cups, and yogurt. The food industry is on board and has been working with Congress to implement these changes. Pat?
Thank you. Wendy, does that make you happy that in lunch rooms you wouldn't eat that junk food anyhow, would you?
I loved Pizza Day, and when
Pizza Day.
yeah, and that's greasy, and pepperoni pizza and greasy hamburgers. But kids are just so overweight these days, and I guess anything that can be done to get the junk food out of the machines,
I tell you, when I was in business, I guess, law school, someplace, I lost a lot of weight. I mean, I worked hard, and I was down to really trim weight. I was working out, and I was down low. So later on, I got a job as an assistant pastor in a church, and they didn't have pizza night, but they had
potluck.
Well, it was not potluck. It was just like Wednesday night. They feed you, and what did they have? They had slimy, overcooked roast beef, lots of gravy, overcooked potatoes, mashed potatoes, white bread rolls, and apple pie.
I know in the South they cook the life out of the vegetables, and they're just kind of soggy and they have no life
left. You get through eating that stuff and you're starved because none of it satisfies, so you want more to eat. And before long, my weight started to go up, and it's one of those things you've been fighting ever since, but it's just terrible. Yeah. And those kids, if they're hungry, they go get a snack and they get a Twinkies pack, or they get something with cookies or candy or a sugary Coke, and they're starved. They eat it again, and
Well, they're putting diet drinks in there, which I don't think are any better for them, but I guess
worse.
Yeah, I think so.
Fruit drinks maybe, but not diet drinks.
Amen.
Okay. Well, we've settled that. Wendy's going to be the food commissioner for the nation. All right, what's next?
Well, up next, new tactics to seize land in Israel.
The Arabs have realized that they can't beat us with war. They can't beat us with tanks, with missiles, even with suicide bombers. So what they're doing is they're taking the land piece by piece. And there are no tanks in this war. It's tractors, it's bulldozers.
See how the Israelis are fighting back after this.
Friday.
They would not live as 13 colonies, but as one nation under God.
The Great Awakening that created the greatest nation on earth.
Is it probable that an empire can rise without his aid?
And then,
I was a master of disguise.
but she couldn't hide forever.
I could no longer function.
The stranger who discovered her secret. Friday on the 700 Club.
Have you heard the cry, land for peace? The Israelis that have a tiny, tiny little sliver of the Middle East have got to give up more land. They have to give up the West Bank. They have to give up half of East Jerusalem. They've got to give up the Sinai. They have to give up this. They have to give up the other. And the more they give up, that's supposed to give peace. Well, is that an illusion? Secretary of State John Kerry is trying to start up the so-called Middle East peace process again, and there's a big problem. Palestinians still refuse to recognize Israel's right to exist, and they also want all the land. And as Eric Stakelbeck tells us, the Palestinians and their supporters are using creative new methods to take that land away.
For many Americans, a stroll through the neighborhood park is a great way to find peace and relaxation. Residents of the Israeli town of Gush Etzion feel the same way. Yet when they began planting trees to spruce up a local state park, they got a rude awakening from their Arab neighbors.
The water pipes were cut by the Arabs, and the trees didn't get water, and this is what was left of them, completely dry and completely dead.
Nadia Matar's group, Women in Green, is dedicated to safeguarding Israel's biblical lands. Netzer, a park in Gush Etzion on Israeli state land, has become a flashpoint in that struggle.
The Arabs have a very big difficulty to see the Jews planting on their biblical, God-given homeland, even in areas where there's no dispute at all, like here.
For years, the Jewish residents of Gush Etzion have been coming here to Netzer, and they've been planting trees. They're trying to make this land beautiful. Some of the local Arabs have been coming here, oftentimes by cover of night, not only chopping down the trees, but even cutting the irrigation lines.
Gush Etzion lies south of Jerusalem and Bethlehem, an area known biblically as Judea. The UN, however, calls this region the West Bank and wants Israel to hand it over to the Palestinians. Gush Etzion Mayor Davidi Perry told CBN News Israelis are simply developing the same sovereign land where Jews walked thousands of years ago.
We are, as people that live here, want to keep the pieces of lands, to extend the communities, to have agriculture like trees and stuff. But the Arabs want to, so they're trying to fight through the land. They're trying to take out the trees.
Perry says Gush Etzion residents often face violence from local Palestinians.
These Arabs live under the Palestinian government, let's say, and they have the feeling that they have to fight with us, and they go out to the roads, throwing stones, firebomb.
Matar calls destruction of Jewish planted trees here agricultural jihad, funded in part, she says, by anti-Israel groups and the European Union.
All of a sudden, they've been funded so well that they go up with tractors, fancy tractors all over, and steal our land, our state land.
Further south in Israel's Negev region, another controversial attempt to seize land is underway. CBN spoke to one activist who calls it a silent conquest by Israel's Bedouin minority.
The Arabs have realized they can't beat us with war. They can't beat us with tanks, with missiles, even with suicide bombers. So what they're doing is they're taking the land, piece by piece, and there are no tanks in this war. It's tractors, it's bulldozers.
Ari Briggs is a spokesman for Regavim International, an organization that wants to preserve and protect Israel's national lands. He says that the historically nomadic Arab Bedouins are taking up residence illegally in the Negev, a largely desert region that makes up some 2/3 of Israel's overall land. Although the Bedouin originally hail from Saudi Arabia and only migrated to Israel a few hundred years ago, the UN treats them as natives and supports their claims.
There are Bedouin all over the Middle East. And the only place the UN has classed them as indigenous is to southern Israel, to the Negev.
Now Briggs says some 90,000 Bedouin have set up shop in the Negev, not far from Beersheba, one of Israel's largest cities. Imagine such a scenario developing in the deserts outside Los Angeles or Phoenix, and you get the idea. Crime, poor education, and a lack of women's rights are common in Bedouin communities. The Bedouins' rapid demographic growth is another challenge for Israel.
They have on average 3 to 4 wives, on average 20 to 30 kids, the highest growth rate in the world, 5.6%. It means they double their population every 15 years.
Like in Netzer, Briggs says the Bedouin land grab is funded by Israel's enemies abroad.
They understand the importance of taking over the land of Israel. They couldn't do it with tanks. They couldn't do it with missiles. Now they're doing it with good money. Also coming in, of course, from Qatar, from Bahrain, from the UAE, from Saudi Arabia.
Briggs believes money is also being raised in American and European mosques to support the Bedouins' efforts. He wants the Israeli government to do more to protect the Negev. Meanwhile, in Netzer, locals promise to continue planting trees despite Palestinian and international hostility.
Hopefully with God's blessing they will stay and they will grow, and they'll be beneficial for all those who live here, both the Jews and the Arabs who are living here.
Eric Stakelbeck, CBN News, reporting from Gush Etzion, Israel.
Thanks, Eric. You know, ladies and gentlemen, I was just reading a book recently about this, that there never has been a country called Palestine. The Romans called the area Palestina, but it really was Israel, and they didn't want to identify that. But there's never been a Palestinian land. And this author of this book said, all right, if you're Palestinians, who was your first king and what language did he speak? And the answer is there was no Palestine, and there was no king, and there has never been a Palestinian language. The land, since the days of conquest, about 1,300 AD, I guess it was, or 1300, I'd say it right, BC, I guess, 1300 BC, about the time of Moses. That's when the Israelis came in and conquered the land, and it's been theirs ever since. But now the United Nations wants to take it away. But those of us who love Israel have to fight in this cause, because when they have a tiny, tiny sliver of the land, the Arabs have it all. They have huge territories of land. They could settle those Bedouins. They could settle those displaced people. When, you know, the UN is still in operation with displaced persons. They refuse to settle them. The so-called Palestinians that got moved out in that 48 war, they still haven't settled them. They're still there.
Yeah, well, the Bible's very clear. You know, that land belongs to Israel.
Yeah.
But isn't it interesting how they're just taking it little by little?
Well,
it's very subtle.
Well, I talked to Yasser Arafat some time ago, and he basically said, well, little by little, we're going to get Jerusalem, and that's what they keep going for. And everybody said, oh, no, they won't get Jerusalem. Yeah, they are going to get Jerusalem unless somebody stands up and stops them. And that'll be the last point of controversy, I believe. I think Jerusalem will be the place where the line is drawn and where the war takes place.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you, too, about what happened yesterday. A lot of people said it was such a sad day for America with the Supreme Court, you know, overturning DOMA. And a lot of people said, you know, well, look what happened to Rome. Are we headed in that direction?
55 million aborted babies since Roe versus Wade. Bible taken out of the school, prayer taken out of the school, secularism on the rise, and now homosexuality, which was called an abomination in the Bible, has been given the status of a constitutionally protected class, and a justice of the Supreme Court saying anybody who's against this lifestyle is somehow bigoted or biased or whatever term he used. But the defenders of traditional lifestyle and biblical values are going to be marginalized very quickly. They are already, and looked upon as bigots, and, you know.
Yeah, well, the debate continues.
Well, it's going to be, unfortunately, on this one, it's been cast as a civil rights struggle, and it's no longer a moral issue, it's civil rights. And once you say civil rights, then you look back to Martin Luther King and others, and you say, well, we've got to stand for the oppressed. Well, that's what's happening. So, ladies and gentlemen, your liberties are in danger, because read the Bible about Sodom and Gomorrah. That's where the term comes from, sodomy. Look what happened to Sodom. After a while, there wasn't any other way, and God did something pretty drastic. Wendy?
All right, up next, meet the woman whose husband made headlines when he was sentenced to 8 years in Iran's notorious Evin prison. Naghmeh Abedini joins us with an update on Pastor Saeed's status and the global fight to set him free. Last June, Naghmeh Abedini said goodbye to her husband Saeed as he set off on a trip. She never imagined that 12 months later, she'd be in the middle of a fight for his freedom and his life. Naghmeh Abedini is living a nightmare. Last July, her husband, American pastor Saeed Abedini, was in Iran to help establish an orphanage when he was arrested by Iranian authorities. Then, in January, he was sentenced to 8 years in Iran's infamous Evin prison. His crime? Preaching the gospel. Saeed has endured physical and psychological abuse and has been denied medical treatment. Naghmeh says at times, the strain over the past 12 months has seemed unbearable for her and her 2 young children.
I was in the edge of extreme depression and anxiety and worry. And I could see that where I was almost being broken, I would have had to check myself in, but the Lord didn't let me break.
The American Center for Law and Justice has been fighting for Saeed's freedom. Naghmeh believes that through prayer, it will be God, not the government, who will free her husband. And please welcome to the 700 Club, Naghmeh Abedini. It's great to have you here.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, tell us the latest on your husband. Has anybody seen him, and how is he holding up?
His family gets to see him every week, so they saw him this week, and he was doing okay. He's still, he's had some beatings, and so he still has issues with his internal bleeding. He's much better, but there's still pains, and we're still hoping to get him treated for his physical pain.
Is he in solitary confinement?
No, he was in solitary early May, and they were supposed to keep him there for 20 days, but they ended up keeping him for 10 days, and it was a way to break him and have him repent of his faith and deny Christ. And he actually came out of solitary, even though he went in with a lot of pain and bleeding, and he actually came out much better. He had had an encounter with God, but he still he's had a few beatings, and he still needs medical attention.
Well, Iran has a new president, President Rouhani. Is this good news at all for your husband, or will it factor in at all?
You know, he at the same day he was elected, there was a Christian sentenced to a few years in prison. Above Rouhani is the supreme leader, Khamenei, who really controls everything. And his mindset, his policy towards Christianity has always been the same, that they see it as a national threat, security to their national threat to their national security. And I don't see much of a change. I hope they try to bring more freedom for the Christians and release Said, but
right now, you don't think it'll make much of a difference?
I don't think it's going to make much of a difference.
Naghmeh, you were born in Iran to Muslim parents, grew up Muslim. How did you become a Christian?
God's grace. I was always seeking Him. I grew up when I was very young in Iran, and there was a war, and there was bombs, and people were dying around me. There was a war with Iran and Iraq, and I always, that made me think about who is God, where is He? And I tried to find Him through Islam, and at the young age, 8 or 9. And when I came to the States, my brother had a vision of Christ, and he said, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. And and
you were young, right?
We were 8 or 9, and Jesus said, you know, and he felt such a strong love. And when he saw that vision, he came to me and he told me, and he was a changed person. And so,
so you got saved based on your brother's dream about Jesus.
But it was we're twins, so we're so close. So I just saw he was so shaken, and so I accepted Christ at that age.
Talk about childlike faith.
Yeah, and it's been, you know, it's been an amazing journey. My parents thought they were very angry. They secluded us from friends. We couldn't see any friends. We couldn't go to church. We couldn't have a Bible for most of from 9 till I was 18. And they thought they're going to forget about this. They've just been brainwashed by the West. And I never forgot about him. And he's always been in my heart, and he's always been directing me and guiding me. And even without a Bible or without any fellowship, he's always been there.
Well, how did you meet Said?
Soon after September 11th, November of 2001, I actually earlier that year, in summer of 2001, the Lord had really put on my heart to go back to Iran. And I purchased the ticket for October of 2001. And in September 11, when the attacks happened in New York, everyone said, maybe you shouldn't go back. It's dangerous in the Middle East. But I felt the Lord telling me to go back to share the gospel with the Muslims, to be, you know, love on them and share about Christ.
And when you first saw him, I mean, you'd been praying for a man who wasn't ordinary.
No, yes, I've been praying. I said, Lord, I don't care about money. I don't care about status. I want someone who's passionate, sold out to you. And I would have never thought that, I mean, I'm so blessed to have Said as my husband, but I would have never thought he'd be so passionate. And when I met him, he was just a worshiper and such a prayer warrior. And I just loved his passion for Christ.
Naghmeh, what was he doing? Exactly what was he doing when he was arrested last summer?
He was working on an orphanage that a government approved. He was working with the government to start. We'd started on the orphanage since 2009, and the kids and I had gone back with him in 2011 and stayed for a few months, hoping the orphanage would be open.
He was there under government approval.
Yes. They had approved it. He was working with them.
Yeah. Now, you have 2 young children. How are they coping? I know they must be missing their dad terribly.
Oh, it's been hard. Recently I shared a video on my Facebook that shows Jacob crying, saying, Jesus, I love you, bring daddy home. And he's just in tears. And they sent out balloons and messages to Jesus saying, bring him home. And, you know, like childlike faith, they prayed, and then they wake up, and sometimes they wake up, they had a dream, and they look around, and And they say, is Daddy home yet? And I say, no, we just gotta wait. I try to speak to them from the Bible about patience.
But you believe he will come home?
I do. I've had to, like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, I've had to say, I believe God's gonna deliver, but even if he doesn't, he's still a good God. And I've had to really lay it at the altar. I've learned to not control situations or push God for a certain outcome, and just to let go and say, God, you are a good God. You've been so gracious and kind to us during this time. And whatever the outcome, I do hope he's gonna come home, but whatever the outcome, God's still God.
And you have been so strong for your kids, but you've just been strong in general. You've been on every TV show. You've been in front of Congress. You've been to the UN, working tirelessly to educate people and to let them know what's happening to your husband. How do you do that? Where do you get the strength?
From Christ. I was a crumbling mess, and I found the connection to the vine. And the Bible says, when we find that connection, the fruit comes. And I have to say, one of the highlights, it's been a year since I physically held my husband and said goodbye. We said on June 22nd of 2012, I said a quick goodbye. I said, see you in a few weeks, never thinking. But I look at the year, speaking before the UN, I got to share about Christ. I got to say, Said is in prison because he believes Jesus Christ died for the sin of humanity, and whoever believes in him can be reconciled to God. I got to say that in front of 196 countries, and as I was speaking, had earpieces, and it was being translated in their language, and they got to hear. I know the Lord has given me strength to fight for my husband, but also he's given me a platform to share his gospel where the UN might have never had this straightforward message about the gospel, and they were talking about peace and bringing world peace, and I got to share that this is the only way. And at the end of the message, I said, and this is the God of peace you're all looking for. And so it's been amazing to the platform God has given me to fight for my husband, but also really to share the gospel, which is what this world needs. Our world is getting darker and darker, and
well, you're such an inspiration that you can focus on that, and we admire you so much, and our prayers are with you. And I know millions around the world are praying for your husband's release, which we pray does come very soon.
Amen.
Naghmeh, thanks so much for being with us today.
Thank you.
And to find more about Pastor Said and how you can help in the fight for his release, just log on to our website at cbn.com. Pat?
What a wonderful testimony, and a brave woman. Well, God's going to get that man out of prison. You're going to keep on praying, and we're not going to forget him. And you're going to see Said come home stronger and more powerful than ever. Well, coming up, he was always the smallest guy on the team, and he never expected to play Major League ball. Phillies outfielder Ben Revere reveals the secret to his unlikely success. And then we'll bring it on with your email questions. Tyler says, I'm 15 and I'm so addicted to sex. Help me.
Welcome to Washington for this CBN News break. Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel says the Pentagon is working to extend benefits to the spouses of gay military members as soon as possible. That includes health care, housing, and other federal benefits. Spouses of gay military members could also be allowed to be buried in Arlington National Cemetery. The plan is scheduled to go into effect on October 1st. The Pentagon estimates there are 18,000 same-sex couples in the U.S. military. The only abortion clinic in North Dakota has filed a federal lawsuit. It's challenging a state law that bans abortions as early as 6 weeks into a pregnancy. That's when an unborn baby's heartbeat can first be detected. The lawsuit is also challenging another state law that forbids abortions because of a genetic defect, such as Down syndrome. You can always get the latest from CBN News by going to our website at cbnnews.com. Pat and Wendy will be back with more of the 700 Club right after this.
Welcome back. You're watching the 700 Club. Glad you're with us. You know, a high school student probably has as much chance of being hit by an asteroid as being called out of high school into the big leagues. 1%. I think that's probably stretching it, is how many baseball players are drafted right out of a high school player into the big leagues. But as Sean Brown reports, Ben Revere was one of these who got touched by stardom to his surprise.
To tell you the truth, man, I think I would never play Major League Baseball, ever.
When Ben Revere was selected in the first round of the 2007 MLB draft, he thought he must have been dreaming. Because not only was he drafted right out of high school, he wasn't what most, including himself, considered major league material.
You know, all that happened, and I was just like, oh my goodness. It's just, I didn't think I was gonna even go D1, you know? Because, you know, I was the smallest guys on every team. And it's just, it was just like, man, I see all these kids like 6'3", big, hitting home runs. I hit home runs, but it was nothing like crazy. And I'm like, there's no way I make it.
It's pretty understandable for Ben to come to that conclusion when considering that the percentage of players being drafted right out of high school is said to be less than 1%. So as a senior, he was just trying to make it to college.
If I should get to college, I'd be happy to just go there and then just get a good job or something. You know, I'd be happy with that. And all of a sudden, like University of Georgia, Florida, Florida State, Miami, all these teams come in and say, we want you to lead out play center field for us next year, your freshman year. I was like, okay, okay, I got to sit and talk about this.
Despite his own misgivings, the pros saw his ability to put the bat on the ball and his speed, which would make him a threat on base and give him the ability to chase down balls. So the phone started to ring.
I've been playing with so many athletic kids in baseball, going all these tournaments, perfect games, hearing all these kids, seeing all the magazines. You know, somebody be on ESPN. Then all of a sudden, my senior year come around, teams were like, yo, we want to draft you first round. And I was just like, and my parents were like, what's going on? I'm like, I have no idea.
When he was selected, naturally, there were doubters.
People talk and say he won't be able to make the big leagues. He's too small. His arm not strong enough. He don't have that power no more. And you know, the Minnesota Twins kind of gave me a chance to show what I got.
After proving himself for 4 seasons in the minors, Ben was called up to the Twins.
Takes a lot of pressure off of Doc.
Now with the Phillies, the undersized outfielder is in his 3rd year in the big leagues. And he says it's not just his talent that has gotten him to the big leagues, but the Lord.
It's a humbling thing. It helps me grow up, you know. It really helps you grow up because you see these little kids there who look up to you and say, like, they'd be like, man, you're my hero. I'm like, I should not be a hero. Jesus should be a hero. It's just, I'm playing this for him. And it's just, you know, playing this game, I never planned for myself. I was gonna play for the big man upstairs. Just because he just gave me this. I mean, he gave me a chance to do this.
Anyone who's played with Ben will tell you that his best quality isn't his ability to catch pop flies, but his charismatic personality that's rooted in his faith in the Lord.
Till this day, I'm just like, thank you. I'm just like, thank you. I'm just like, really, you didn't have to give this to me. No, I would love you no matter what, but no, you give me this chance. No, I'm not going to regret it. And just being 3 years in the big leagues and just, you know, and still here, you know, it's just, you know, it's a definite blessing.
Boy, that's Mr. Hustle. I mean, to tell you, there was a guy for the Reds who was called Mr. Hustle or Captain Hustle or whatever his name was, but this guy's a hustler. He's fabulous, isn't he?
Yeah, amazing.
Okay. Well, we're going to transition to some of the questions that come in on the email and off of Facebook and hither and yon. So we've got a few of those questions. Let's take them.
Tyler wants to know, he says, I'm 15 and I'm so addicted to sex. I have prayed multiple times, but I'm still addicted. What do I do?
That is a toughie. You know, I mentioned before what John said, I write to you, young man, you're strong and you've overcome the evil one. You have the maximum hormones, 15, 16, 17, 18, in that age group, maximum. but you don't have maximum opportunity. So what do? I mean, it's really frustrating. You need to have the Lord touch you in a very special way. I don't know what to say about this, because I don't know how bad you are. But number one, you can't watch porn and keep those things in check. You cannot look at dirty pictures and magazines and sexual activity. You can't do it. You can't talk dirty with your friends. You can't focus on those things. Your mind has to be focused on the Lord, and you need to absorb the Bible and absorb Jesus, and you give this to Him, surrender this. One day, God will give you a wife, and you will be married, and you will have a happy family, and they'll have an outlet for those sexual passions that are burning in your body right now. But you need to turn them over to the Lord and let God minister to you. But as long as you keep stimulating this stuff, it will continue to stay with you. It's like a tiger. Now, it may be that this is some demonic thing that has fastened itself on you, and then you need to have somebody pray for your deliverance. I don't know enough about you, but I know you've got a problem and you've got a tough way to go. But this is the way it is. You've got to determine, I am not going to yield to these temptations. Okay?
Good advice. Pat wants to know, on your show, you answered a woman about where to invest money. You told her ETS. What does that stand for? I looked it up on the internet, and there are quite a few things listed under ETS.
Well, you got it wrong, honey. It's not ETS, it's ETF. It's Exchange Traded Fund. F for fun, not S for sugar. Or
That's why she couldn't find it.
That's why she couldn't find it. Exchange traded funds are just, they're like mutual funds, except that they don't have the same carrying costs. They're a lot cheaper. But what mainly I was recommended was these master limited partnerships that have a favorable tax status, and they pay pretty good dividends, and they're pretty stable regardless of what's going on. So that's what I was talking about. It's ETF, F is in Frank.
Okay, ETF. All right, Cynthia wants to know, my husband's aunt has been trying to convince me of her spiritual beliefs. However, she strongly believes that we can call upon angels by name and ask them to assist us daily, because in the Bible it says we have guardian angels. On every occasion that I see her, she tries to get me to call out to angels. I think that only Jesus Christ is to be called on for things we need.
You're exactly right. The Bible doesn't say we have guardian angels. I know that might shake somebody's belief system, but it says that they're ministering spirits sent to take care of the heirs of salvation, but we don't individually have a, quote, guardian angel. And I think the idea of trying to name angels and to pray to angels, this is absolutely not biblical. We're to pray to the Lord God Himself through Jesus Christ in the power of the Holy Spirit. And there's no angel. Now, yes, angels are real. And we have been placed a little lower than the angels. And yet, Jesus Christ realized we're going to be crowned with glory and honor one day. One day we will judge the angels. That's what the Bible says. One day you will judge the angels. But right now, we're not to pray to angels. If God sends an angel, give the angel the honor that they do, but don't worship them and don't pray to them. Your aunt is wrong, okay?
Interesting. William wants to know, should I give money to a homeless person on the street? My non-Christian friend thinks I should give money to the homeless, but I think I should only offer food. I told my friend that the homeless person could use my money to buy drugs. My friend says I'm judging.
Well, you ask your friend if there's a murderer that you ought to give him a loaded .45, or if there's a sex addict that you should give him a video of pornography. And the answer is you're not judging, you're being helpful. We're supposed to have discernment. We don't forsake wisdom. Now, I remember some time ago, up in New York, these guys were always wanting to go to New Jersey. You know, you're there in Manhattan, and I've got to get money to go across on the ferry to Jersey. I mean, that was the pitch. I've got my family over there. Will you please help me? They didn't want to go to Jersey. They wanted to get a drink. So one of them came up to me and he said, look, I've got to go. And I said, okay, look, you want some food? Right across the street's the Automat. I'll take you over there and I'll buy you lunch. And he looked at me like I was out of my mind. Because I unmasked him. No, don't willy-nilly give your money to some panhandler who will use it to buy a drink. Help them. Some people have a food card, you know, that they can get, and or Walmart or something. Okay, here, you can go buy some clothes. Anyhow, that's all the time we've got, but your friend is wrong and you're right on this one. Well, when Sandy Sullivan started a home-based business, she struggled to make a profit. For 5 years, Sandy barely broke even until she found a way to triple her income. Watch this.
Sandy Sullivan's husband is a successful businessman, but Sandy wanted a career of her own. She also wanted to be at home for her children, so she started her own business.
They offered people like me an opportunity to be a mom at home, be there for our kids, and not have to go to an office every day.
For 5 years, Sandy's business was just getting by. So she asked God to help her and started studying the biblical principles that deal with finances.
I had a conversation with God and I said, partner with me, help me, show me what you want me to do. I'm willing.
The very next day, Sandy was watching the 700 Club and saw budgeting expert Angela Kaufman on the program. Sandy decided to advertise her business on Angela's website.
I got really great response the very first month. I think I brought 6 people onto my team. And then the next month, I got another 4, and I thought, wow, this is so great.
So Sandy also decided to start tithing and become a 700 Club partner.
But all of a sudden, I had people calling me, would you consider me working with you? I'm like, sure. It was wonderful.
Sandy increased her giving to CBN.
It got to the point where every time I wrote a check to the 700 Club and literally put it in the mailbox, 30 seconds later I get a phone call from somebody saying, I understand you have a business. I mean, it was laughable almost.
In just 1 year, Sandy's income tripled.
The year that I applied all these principles, especially with the tithing, the very next year I earned $173,000.
Sandy says God asks for us to tithe because he wants to bless us.
He's there for you when you call out to him. You know, if you give, he'll give back, pressed down, shaken together, overflowing. It's about the principle, not about the amount. As I move through life going forward now, I know that if there's something that he's directing, I'm excited to be a part of it because I know it's going to be something amazing.
I love somebody who grabs hold of the biblical principles and lets them work out in their life. And Sandy did it, and God blessed her beyond measure. He'll bless you, but I don't say give to get, but I do say follow God's principles and let the Lord do what he promised. Telephone number, call in. We can count on you. We need to count on you. Well, tomorrow, meet a 9-year-old who competes in triathlons, towing his disabled brother along with him. And today we leave you with these words from 1 Timothy, for bodily exercise profits a little, but godliness is profitable for all things. For Lee, Wendy, and all of us, this is Pat Robertson. See you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Give me that. Bye. Sure, life is busy, but I found a way to make a huge difference in people's lives. I guess you could say I'm changing the world right here from home. I bring medical supplies and doctors to people in need, and dig wells so that villagers can have clean and safe water to drink. I make it possible to preach the gospel in over 100 countries, including right here in America. And when disaster strikes, I'm there, providing food, thank you, and emergency supplies to give people hope again. Every day, CBN and I are making the world a better place. Here you go. My life is hectic, so I joined CBN through Pledge Express. My bank does all the work, and I know that my gift is being used where it's needed most. So become a CBN partner and join Pledge Express, because you can do a world of good right from where you are. Hi, good morning. Are you ready to get started?